Hello and welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be the first in a new series called Straight to the Point. This series will include videos which are short, condensed with information, and have no sponsors. The purpose of these videos is to give you as much information on a very specific point or topic, without rambling too much about other things or repeating myself. Of course, I will be making my other videos which require more detail, which then results in longer videos. The first episode of this series is going to be called Warming Up Your Aim. If you play Rust with a PvP focus, then you know that every single fight counts, and it's for this reason that it's extremely important that you warm up your aim before you get onto a real server. If you do this consistently, you'll start to notice not only an improvement in aim in the long term, but you'll see that you're winning more fights after you've warmed up in general. Know that this video is just tailored towards guns, as I think warming up with a bow is completely different. Let me know if you want to see a video for that. It's important to note that whilst warming up, you will always experience the law of diminishing returns, which essentially states that as you increase your input, the rate at which your output grows decreases. The input here being the time spent warming up, and the output being the improvement in your aim. It's for this reason that you don't want to warm up for too long, as you won't really see much of an improvement after the first hour anyway. I would recommend 15 to 30 minutes, however, of course time constraints are a thing, so do what suits you. Some other advice is to warm up with the guns that you find using the most. For example, if you're a solo and you only really get access to pistols, then make sure you're warming up with those. There's no point in practicing and perfecting your AK spray control if you rarely ever get the gun. My next tip is to make sure that you're practicing moving whilst you're warming up. Making yourself a difficult target is almost just as important as hitting the headshots on your opposition. It's for these reasons that you want to make sure that whilst you're shooting a few bullets, every now and then you're moving left to right, and whilst you're spraying guns, you're constantly moving left and right in an awkward and unpredictable pattern. The three main forms of warm-up that I do are tracking, tapping, and recoil control. With tracking, you're not actually shooting the gun, you're just maintaining your sight on the head of a moving object. This isn't as important if you've spent years playing the game and you keep the same sensitivity. However, for those who struggle to maintain their cursor on top of a head, then it's good to do this just for a little bit every single time. You then quickly transition into the next form of warm-up, which is tap firing. You can tap fire with pretty much any gun, however I wouldn't recommend it on the SMGs. While tap firing, it's important to only go for headshots. There's very few times where body shots are preferable, and usually it's to do with an SMG anyway. It's important that you change your distance at which you're shooting at the bots whilst you're warming up, as in Rust there's many different fights you'll encounter, and a lot of them are actually at long distances whilst others are point blank. Something that's important to note is that Rust players in general will pull down their gun more than they need to. The reason for this is that when fighting at long distances, you'll notice that the iron sight will often cover up where the enemy is, and it's for this reason that if you pull down more than you need to, you can flick back up and see where the enemy is going. This clip from H-Cabin, you can see that he's pulling down more than he needs to, but then flicks back up in order to try and go for the head. And of course, at close distances, you don't have to go down further, as the opponent won't be able to move too much anyway. This is more for medium to long ranges, where you can see that the iron sight is in fact covering the majority of the enemy. The final thing to warm up is recoil control. Because the patterns are learnable, if you spend time learning the recoil control of all of Rust's guns, then when you finally get to use this, pair it with your tracking ability and your bullets will be unstoppable. I'd recommend spending the most time on the MP5 simply because the recoil control is actually really easy to learn if you spend a lot amount of time on it, and the gun's so cheap and it does a ridiculous amount of damage if your recoil control is good. The AK is important to learn as well, however keep in mind about what I said earlier, only really practice it if you think you're going to get your hands on one. As for all of the other guns, you can learn their recoil patterns, however for the other SMGs it's pretty easy to just spray with them without learning the recoil control too much, as you're basically just pulling down. The LR is pretty easy, spend a few minutes learning that, however I wouldn't spend too much time on it. The ability to spray a gun really just comes down to the amount of hours you put into learning the recoil control. There's no secret tip, all you have to do is just go onto an aim server and spend hours spraying into walls. However, there are 3 tips in my opinion that can slightly improve the rate at which you learn the recoil. The first tip is to do it in parts. The first 5 to 10 bullets are by far the most important, so you want to make sure that you've mastered those before you move on to the other ones. Because you get more aim cone the more you spray the gun anyway, some people only spray the first half clip of the AK. The next tip is to be strict on yourself and to spray at longer distances. Even if you're hitting barely any of the bullets, it's much better to spray at a target which is over 100 meters away than to spray at some something which is 20 meters away. Even though it feels good to triple headshot your bot over and over, the thing is you're going to be less aware of the slight mistakes you're making at every bullet. It's therefore much more beneficial to spray at something which is at least 100 meters away, as you'll be aware of all the mistakes you're making, and furthermore, if you go onto an aim train server such as UKN, you can see the mistakes you're making on the left hand side of the screen. It's important that after you've warmed up against bots that you go out and shoot against real players in PvP areas. Not only does this help you shoot against irrational movement, but it can also help you with gear fear, as a lot of people freak out when they're first starting to learn the game when they come against real players. If you want to warm up with one gun, it would be better if you go onto that specific arena. However, gun game on Combat Tags gives you a chance to warm up with all of them. Having a friend also helps out tremendously, as you can go into private 1v1 arenas and choose whichever gun you want. And that's it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this more condensed format. Looking back, it still doesn't feel that short. However, I really struggled to condense as much information as possible without missing out on a lot of key points. Also, the aim servers that I use are UKN and Combat Tags, however, there's plenty that you can choose from. With all that being said, thank you very much for watching the video, and I hope to see you in the next one.